All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are digging into a huge question, one that feels like it's just hanging in the air these days. We're going to explore this idea of a helplessness machine and ask a really uncomfortable question. Is all the chaos we're feeling a sign that our world is broken, or is it a sign that it's working exactly the way it was designed to?
I mean, you feel it, right? The sense that things are just spinning out of control. There's this constant hum of anger and division, this feeling that the very systems we're supposed to count on are failing us. It's a feeling that is so easy to recognize, but really hard to put your finger on exactly why.
And the evidence is absolutely everywhere. You look around, and trust in our most basic institutions is in a free fall. Our politics, it feels less like a debate and more like we're just picking sides for a battle. And our schools, the places meant to shape our future, are caught in the middle of funding crises and ideological wars. It honestly feels like we're being torn apart.
Which brings us right to the heart of the mystery for today's explainer. Is all of this chaos just a big historical accident, a series of random, unfortunate events? Or is it possible that there's a logic to it all, a kind of machine built over centuries that's designed to produce these exact feelings of helplessness and division we're all swimming in? Let's find out.
So, first things first, let's just lay out the scene. The proof that our system is under some serious stress is overwhelming. And you know what's really jarring? How fast it's all happened.
It's wild to think about how drastically the whole vibe has changed. If you just rewind about 30 years to 1989, the world felt hopeful. The Berlin Wall came down. It really felt like democracy was on this unstoppable winning streak across the planet. Now, snap back to today. Wow, the picture could not be more different. We're seeing rising political violence, rhetoric that's designed to tear us apart, and you're even hearing whispers of civil war. That optimism from back then feels like a lifetime ago.
And a lot of the time, the engine driving all this division is just language. When political talk, like the example right here, frames every single issue as a life-or-death battle of us versus them, it stops being a discussion. Suddenly, it's an existential crisis. And in a crisis, compromise looks like weakness, and violence, well, violence can start to look like a legitimate, even heroic option.
So you have to ask, how does an entire society get to a point where it's so vulnerable to this stuff? The answer, it turns out, might not be in politics at all. It might be in our heads. There's this really powerful psychological trigger that you can actually teach people, and it's called learned helplessness.
So what in the world is learned helplessness? Well, imagine you're in a situation that's stressful and awful, and no matter what you do, you can't get out. After that happens over and over again, you eventually just stop trying. Even if a door opens and you could escape, you don't even try anymore. You have learned that fighting back is pointless. You've been taught to be helpless.
And what's truly mind-blowing is how easy it is to do this to someone. There's a famous experiment that shows it perfectly. You take two groups of people. Group A gets anagram puzzles that are literally impossible to solve. Group B gets super easy ones. So Group A is sitting there getting more and more frustrated, feeling dumber by the second, while they watch Group B solve theirs in a snap. Then, for the final round, both groups get the same easy puzzle. And guess what happens? The group that was conditioned to fail, they don't even try. They just sit there. In just a few minutes, they learned to be helpless.
And the feeling it creates is deep. It's not just an intellectual thing. As one person from that impossible group said, my confidence was shot. You don't just give up on the puzzle. You start to give up on yourself. You internalize the failure and start to believe that you're the problem. Okay, so if that's what can happen in a lab in just 5 minutes, what happens when that conditioning is stretched out over, say, 12 years in a system designed for that very purpose? Let's take a look at the assembly line for this mindset, our modern education system. This quote right here, this is from one of the intellectual founders of the Prussian school model, the very model that a lot of our public schools are based on. I mean, let that sink in for a second. The stated goal was not to enlighten, it was to destroy free will, to literally engineer a person who is incapable of thinking or acting in any way their teachers wouldn't want them to. It was designed for control from day one.
And wouldn't you know it, this model was the perfect tool for the Industrial Revolution. The things the Prussian military valued, duty, discipline, following orders without question, were the exact same things factory owners needed. They didn't want innovators or rebels. They needed a workforce that would show up on time, do the same repetitive task all day, and be easily replaceable. They needed cogs in a machine. And so our schools were built not to foster genius, but to ensure compliance.
And the long-term damage of this model is huge. You know, Picasso once said, "All children are born artists. The problem is to remain an artist when we grow up." Well, this system has a tendency to educate the creativity right out of us. It punishes mistakes, so we become terrified of being wrong, and that fear is the enemy of originality. It makes kids with incredible non-academic gifts feel like they're not smart. And the end product? Well, it can be a society of people who are conditioned to follow, not to think for themselves.
So now, let's connect the dots. You have a population that's been subtly trained for compliance, a population conditioned to feel helpless. How does that make a country vulnerable to, say, someone trying to tear down democratic norms? Well, the sources we're looking at today argue there's a pretty clear playbook for that.
And according to this analysis, it's a methodical process. Step 1 is to gut public services, make things break so people lose all faith that government can do anything right. Next, you build up loyal forces, agencies that answer only to you. Then, you blur the lines between military and police by deploying federal troops in cities. And finally, you go for the foundation. You attack the voting process itself, and you start stripping away legal rights, always starting with the most vulnerable people first.
And this isn't some abstract theory. Take, for example, a proposed 50% budget cut to the Department of Education. The sources here argue this isn't just about saving money. It's a strategic move. It's step 1, break a foundational system to convince people that nothing works anymore.
And the human cost of this is very real. The sources point to things like immigration raids happening at public schools, a Supreme Court ruling that allows people to be stopped based on their ethnicity, and even targeting the lawyers who try to help these people. The argument here is that these aren't just policies, they're tools to create a climate of fear, designed to make whole communities feel absolutely powerless.
So once you've created that climate of fear and helplessness, you're ready for the final, most ambitious piece of the machine, moving beyond controlling what people do and starting to control what they believe is real. This leads us to this fascinating and honestly pretty unsettling concept of the invisible college. It's the idea that certain powerful groups don't just hide secrets from us. They actively shape our entire understanding of the world. They don't just keep us in the dark. They build a whole new reality for us to live in.
And the tactics described are pretty scary. We're talking about systematically destroying official records, hiding important scientific discoveries, unleashing disinformation agents to flood the zone and corrupt the truth. The ultimate goal is to create a kind of mental paralysis, to get us to a place where you feel like you can't trust anyone or anything. And when you feel that way, you stop trying to find the truth, just like the people in that anagram experiment stopped trying to solve the puzzle. It's the final stage of helplessness.
So after all of that, the history, the psychology, the political playbook, it all comes down to one final critical thought. We've laid out this whole machine that's designed to teach helplessness. But if it's true, if helplessness really is a learned condition, well then that must mean it can be unlearned. The very first step to breaking free is just realizing you've been taught to feel trapped in the first place. It's realizing the cage isn't real. And that, right there, is an incredibly powerful idea.